That's not something that we naturally are going to come to. You have to kind of have something that shakes you up and rocks your core to really get you to question, like, what am I doing and why am I doing it? And how could I be doing it differently or better?
And an opportunity for people to struggle a little bit with that transition.
You might have to start over.
The mic wasn't on.
Okay.
Oh, no.
That's
Ooh,
good. That was
so
a practice
good.
one.
Oh.
This is actually a strategy, isn't it? You guys plan this. Yeah.
Oh my God, that sucked. We didn't start the mic. Do it again.
It's probably like Miley and Kira's like, okay, let's turn on the mic. Because they've been really rogue.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
turn it off.
Days. Like, just
too
get
much.
them to center.
Welcome back to UNHIREABLE. We're going to dig into another fun topic today. Last time we talked a bit about Bootcamp, and it was really great to hear your entry points into this work, Miley and Kira, and just kind of how you had to kind of grapple with that discomfort and not really knowing exactly what you were entering into, but how it evolved for you over time. I think we're going to get more into that. And just also talk about why students have a hard time with that discomfort and ambiguity.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen quite a few of those.
I think that was one of the cores of Bootcamp when we started putting it together was students are so comfortable being students, and it's such a reassuring place. And the only people who really succeeded in Bootcamp and really got a lot out of it, I think, like Kira and Miley have said, were open to being uncomfortable and not knowing exactly what this was, but trying, right? Mm-hmm. I think the sustained practice of trying in an ambiguous space, which is definitely disorienting and uncomfortable, is really, really powerful. But I think it all is leading to something bigger, which is an identity shift. Because student is such a comfortable identity, especially here at UW. Everyone who comes here is a good student. And it's just the nature of an elite, big flagship state university. So if you're good at school, which is what it takes to get here, why not stick with that? Why not stick with what you know? The problem is, I think, again, Miley and Kira have directly spoken to this, there's going to be a point where you start questioning, is that all there is?
Am I doing this right to get ready?
Like, if I just keep doing more school, so it's whether or not they know it, it's an acknowledgement that there needs to be a shift in who you are and what you do beyond just school. And it's identity shift. And I think it's happening at a pivotal time in their lives. They're leaving childhood. They're leaving the school period. I mean, when you're young, you feel so entrenched. Remember being a little kid and thinking, oh my gosh, when am I going to get to second grade or third grade? Those years seem so long.
Yeah.
You get to the end and then it starts to speed up and then you realize, I can't do this forever. You definitely shouldn't do it forever. So we have them embark on this identity shift. And I think school does a pretty bad job of this. I mean, Kevin, you've got this vantage point of all the ways that identity shifts have occurred with students for a long time here at UW, but it's not easy.
No, and to your point, the tragedy in some ways is when somebody, and we see students like this, comes in, they're a good student, they come in as a freshman, do really well in school, and when they graduate as a senior, they're really not that different than they were when they came in. They just have more credits, they learn more stuff, but they haven't come to define themselves as the person they will be for the next stage of their life. And that I think it happens enough that you'd have to conclude that's on us, not on them.
Absolutely.
So I think you're right. That shift in identity, which is really what early career should be about, changing from a school identity or adding to the student identity a new professional identity that you'll carry on once you graduate. We don't do that well. We don't have a way for people to work through that. And in fact, we make it pretty easy to get through school without having to do that. And I think you're right that people can intuit that there is something else, there is some change that's supposed to happen. They can also, which is correct, they can also correctly intuit that that's hard and it's uncomfortable and I don't know how to do it. And it probably will, and it will take me out of my comfort zone. It'll be more effort. It will require me to do things I don't know how to do or I'm not familiar with. And so, like you said, why would I do that? I'm having a pretty good time, or I know what I'm doing, or I feel confident and competent in my student identity. Why would I sort of rock the boat? And that's rational. And for some students, that might be. It might not be the right time for them. There might be other stuff going on in their lives that they just need to get through school. But for most students, and for everyone, it would be great if college actually was an opportunity to take the time in a space where it is safe to have that discomfort and to fail to do the work of changing identities. Because the big thing is that change is effortful, and it takes time, and it is uncomfortable. And it is in a pretty deep way, not just temporarily uncomfortable, not just a lot of work, but in a way that causes you to rethink who you are. And if that sense of sort of drift and disconnection and feeling disoriented and unmoored, if you don't have that feeling, then it's probably not an identity shift. It's probably just some hard work in your current identity. Because this... there are a few points in life where this happens, where we, in our culture, where we kind of expect this to happen. A transition from childhood to adulthood, which should happen in early career in some way. And that should sort of launch you into the professional part of your life, whatever that work is. And then we talked a little bit about, kind of offline, about a midlife crisis as another kind of point of identity change. Not a structured one, but one that happens enough that in our culture we have a name for it.
Yeah.
So it must happen often enough. Certainly happens. I feel like that's a real thing for me personally.
Are we part of your midlife crisis,
You
Kevin?
are, yes. Thank you for sharing with me. Thank you for allowing me to impose that upon you. Gesture is my midlife crisis. But I think crisis is the right word there.
Yeah.
It's not just this thing I'm thinking about or I'm wondering about or a challenge at work. It's a real, I was this person before, and is this the person I'm supposed to be for the next stage of my life? Which I think in midlife crisis is partly about mortality as well. So like the last stage is how it feels, right? I'm going to die soon, any day now. No. If that change doesn't feel at least a little bit like a crisis, then it probably isn't the kind of change we're talking about. So in a lot of ways, what we're trying to do is build a crisis for students in college.
And a coping mechanism.
A safe place
To have what feels to be an existential crisis, but where you can know it's not actually a crisis in the sense that in which you're unsafe, but one that there's no way to do that change without that discomfort. And so where can I go where someone can kind of help me through it and where they can say, this is what it's going to be like.
Yeah, well,
And
spoiler
there's no way
alert.
around it. Spoiler alert, it's going to be just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Our job essentially, and Bootcamp is an example of this, and to be fair, we've done this for a while in different forms, kind of make students uncomfortable in a way that promotes growth.
Yeah.
And if you know that going in, A, it's going to be uncomfortable, B, it's going to be for the purpose of growth in a place that we are supporting you, then opt in. That's what it's going to be. I'll tell you, I'm not going to tell you the details, but I promise that's what it's going to be about. And so know that coming in, but know that it's that way because that's the only way to change identities. And that's the kind of growth we're talking about.
Isn't that also true, though, in professional growth? In your role as a professional? Like, aren't you also going to feel untethered if you're actually growing?
Yeah. I think we talked a little bit about imposter syndrome. And I think there are points of transition or change in work, also in school, everywhere with all of our identities, even our family identities as a parent or as a child, right? As we move into a different relationship with our family as we grow older and as they grow older. So those are all kind of changes in identity changes represent changes in our relationships with other people as well. But yeah, to your point, so it's going to happen regularly. Sometimes it will be kind of incremental, like it will just be in my current work identity, something was hard that came up and it changed me a little bit and I learned from it. But I came out kind of in the same person, or I still see myself the same way as a professional. That's not so much an identity change as kind of just the evolution of that particular identity. But if I change careers or I change professions or I move to an organization that's totally different, I feel like I don't know what's going on here. What's my job? Who are all these people? I feel like an idiot. I don't know what's going on. That part of that is natural for any change, but part of that is recasting, who am I in this context? Mm-hmm. What am I supposed to do? What value am I creating? How am I supposed to interact with other people? And that, the more different you come out of that transition, the more it represents, a new professional identity. I think particularly if you changed professions, not just like if I went to, okay, I don't even want to get, if I went to another field entirely that I knew nothing about, that would require me to, I want to become an airline pilot. Actually, I would like to become an architect. It's too late for that. If anyone's looking for like an overly old architect trainee, I'm open. I would have to recast everything that, what does it mean to be a professional in that field? Not so I think about that a lot, so maybe it wouldn't be that much, but it's too late for me. That's part of my midlife crisis.
Oh, it's never too late.
I know people say that. I'm pretty sure it's too late. It's definitely too late.
Well, what you just described, I mean, I can speak to my own journey into gesture because all of that resonates with me. I think I was in advising for 11 years, and in my mind, that job was around helping students and trying to make their lives easier. That's really that was the mission for me in that role, and I got so much back from that in the relationships that I formed with students, and every day kind of meeting with students, I was thinking about just how do I solve their problem? How do I make this easier for them? Because you feel it when you're sitting with a student, the stress of navigating this place, it's big and it's complicated, and you think how can I make this easier for them? And so I really felt like I was helping people, and I felt really good about that. And not to say that I didn't help people, but I think joining Gesture, it was such a culture shock because there is this space and time to think about how you're approaching your work and really what is the problem. And it's just given me a lot of pause around really what students need. And I think sometimes I was so quick to solve their problem or alleviate discomfort or make the road easier for them instead of really thinking about what benefit will they gain through navigating this discomfort and how can I support their challenge, because that's how they're going to come out a stronger professional. And I think on some level, I probably had those moments with students, but it's not something I was building into my practice. And so just my short time here has really made me think about if I were going to go back and meet with students every day, how would I approach that work differently? Because I think I was really feeding into this whole culture of do the thing that you have to do, get it done, move on to the next thing. And instead of really thinking about how could I be in a position to support students' growth through this place? Because that would have been more uncomfortable for me. That would be a source of discomfort for me, and people won't like that, right? And as the inherent people pleaser that I am, it was I wasn't going to go there naturally. And so I think this work is really fascinating because I think not only is it about how we set students up to navigate this work, but also for professionals, this is a different kind of mindset to approach how staff could support students. I'm really fascinated by that part of it. So that's where I'm at with it. I think in my third meeting with you, I was I think I'm having an identity crisis in this new job. Because
Kevin's all, yes, finally we're there.
He was I think it's working. And I was okay. But I think to sit with challenge, that's not something that we naturally are going to come to. You have to kind of have something that shakes you up and rocks your core to really get you to question, what am I doing and why am I doing it and how could I be doing it differently or better? So, I don't know. How about for you, Matt?
Well, I've been in with Gesture longer.
Yeah.
And for me, I think in retrospect, a lot of the programming that I had worked on was part of that higher ed apparatus that let students opt out of discomfort.
Yeah.
I gave them opportunity, I sound like this benevolent overlord, but I worked on programming that let students feel good about moving forward with career development when in fact they were avoiding it. And I think that feeling that Kevin spoke to of feeling totally untethered. I mean, maybe I'm oversharing, but our team had a sort of reset retreat this summer before the start of the academic year. And I was emotionally upset about retrospectively looking at my work and thinking about, am I doing good work? I think, and it's hard. I don't want to discount that work because there's good, and I'm sure it had good effects for good people. And
all of it has been a learning moment.
Totally. But I think that was another, and I'm also, Kevin sucked me into his midlife crisis, and then I'm starting my own. So maybe there's a mortality thing on there as well, but I think that was a great reset for myself to say, what are we doing here? And how do we get more students? How do we make sure that with this podcast, with our new space, with our programs over here, we're actually, like Kevin spoke to, allowing students to have this crisis, to support them through it, to let them know it's not the end of the world, but it is going to be upsetting and discomforting.
Well, and it feels important to break down that crisis because I certainly met with students who were having mental health crises, and that's a whole different entity. This is about how you approach work, right? That's what we're talking about. But I think it would be good to hear, Kevin, you describe more of the kind of discomfort that we want to provide students.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great conversation that I've always wondered, I could be either a good boss or the boss ever, because people are, every time somebody comes into C21 and they go through this process, right? And I'm like, hey, that's just part of the growth. Good job. You're on the right path. And then on the other hand, I'm thinking, well, maybe that's just what I wanted to do. So now everyone's got to do that too. But sorry about that. But I do think, to your point, so C21 and Gesture have been, a sort of institutional version of that growth through an identity shift from we're working within the system to help students navigate to we're trying to find a different way of going through the system. So Gesture itself has gone through that transition or is in that transition of what the identity is. And people are like, what is Gesture? What are you doing? What kind of program is it? Why are you doing that weird boot camp? And the answer, is we're trying to find a different way through. And that takes time and effort, just like it takes an individual person time and effort and a space. And we've had the space to be able to practice that. And that's what we want to, create for students as well. To your question, which I now have forgotten because I was talking about how crappy a boss I was, but
No, I think, I guess I'm just curious, I think we need to define crisis a little bit more because that word,
it's loaded.
It's a loaded word.
Totally.
Yeah.
We use, I wouldn't even use that word if it wasn't for midlife crisis as an example of a shift, but you're right. It's not about being unsafe mentally or physically, for sure. And our work starts with creating a space where people can be safe to do difficult work. But there's an element that feels subjectively to the individual like a crisis because it's a identity change makes you question things that you took for granted. It makes you rethink things you thought were pretty obvious and true and didn't have to think about. And disconnecting those gives you a sense that you are now I'm not sure about anything. I thought I knew who I was. I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I knew what I was good at. And now maybe I'm not going to do that thing anymore. Well, what if I'm not good at the other thing? What if I don't know what that thing is? Well, I don't know who I am. Well, what the am I doing here at all? What is this? And that kind of existential crisis, I think, is what we're seeking in a place where, now we have people to help you through that. And now, not just in a counseling kind of way, because I don't know if it comes across, but I'm not really like a counselor type, but a method. And a method that, okay, we've seen people go through this, and we know where we want to help you get to, which is a professional identity and someone who can understand this is the way I want to create value for other people. This is the value I want to bring into the world. That's where we're going. And how do you figure out what that value is and how to do that? That is going to have to come from the individual, but we feel like we've got a method of working through that now. And it's really around telling the story. I felt like that was a good break point.
So sorry.
Don't worry. You did a good job of telegraphing that, so I could know. I could like set up exactly where
It's happening.
Yes, totally.
Get ready.
Sorry, Kevin, I cut you off with my coughing fit.
That's okay. It almost made me have my own coughing fit. So I feel like the key for us is to have a place to induce discomfort in a safe way, and then have a method to work through it. So not just like, hey, go sit there and be uncomfortable, but think about this and think about this, and that's how you will work your way out of it. And that method for us is story. So how do we initially begin by helping students work through a new version of a who am I story and flesh that out through challenge as well as mission mindset, and that becomes the story then that you would also use to get a job and to succeed in that job. So it becomes the core of your professional story. So it's really kind of a little bit of a fake it till you make it thing. Like imagine the new identity you want and then begin telling the story to yourself and others of who that person is and what value they bring to the world.
I think there's been a part of me that when I see students not have that existential crisis around what am I doing here and what's this all about, I actually start to worry about them a little bit in that, what do you think comes at the end of school?
Right.
That if you've been doing school your whole life and college is defined as the end of school and you're not preparing for a transition away from school, what are you doing? And again, I feel comfortable saying this. I think it's an indictment of higher ed that higher ed puts in a lot of things to make sure that students can avoid having that. We're guilty of it here on this campus. I see it all the time. Yeah. But, those are some signs of students who I can't compel them.
Just want to say that while we are not sponsored by cough drops, we should be
We are
because we're open. If anybody's listening wants to come and approach us. I cut you off, Matt. You're right in the middle. Okay.
It's all good.
Okay.
I was thinking that the students who are avoiding these existential crises are avoiding growth, and they're setting themselves up for maybe even a worse one. I was probably a victim of that. Actually, in retrospect, and I'm just curious, as the five of us sit around this table of differing ages and differing experiences, how many of you have knowingly had, now looking back, an existential crisis?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're not alone in this. This is normal. I would hope this would happen because if it doesn't happen during college, I'm really concerned about the roles that you have after college. That early career phase that we call it, if it doesn't start during college, it's just getting delayed. And I think this then contributes to so many of the news articles you read about underemployment or what are you going to do with that degree? Or, well, it's because you avoided this.
Yeah.
And I think there's a part of me that's excited because gesture is this space where we can, inhibit those horrific outcomes later. So
Well, and I mean, we were talking about this earlier, but every year students would graduate and then, like a week later, get all these emails being like, okay, that was great. What do I do now? And I think that always broke my heart because it's like, oh, you're navigating this now out there without any resources, I mean, not that there's not any resources. You have people that you've met and connections that you've made, but it's just like, it's such a bummer when that is where it begins for folks, when they have to navigate that. And so that's, like I feel similarly excited that people get to kind of really think about how to develop that other story that they have, that they can play that card when they get out in the world.
Totally. Well, and I think that sets us up for where we have to go next, which is, Kevin just mentioned it, we've all talked about it, which is story. And there's something intrinsic about our work that is specific for students who are majoring in the liberal arts, in that the story of their major it can't be the only story they have versus, and I think we need to dive into this and go a little deeper, but that feels like if you are in that spot, and I'm hoping there are students out there listening saying, yes, I know there's something more, I'm ready for it. I think we need to then situate that, how that fits in the big apparatus of higher ed, which is your degree, your major, the story of what you're doing here, and where gesture can fit in that. That feels like a good place to go next time.
I want to clarify real quick, just in case you don't know what liberal arts are, because I did not, and I was in humanities forever. So I didn't know if we wanted, it's arts and natural sciences, social sciences, humanities. Those are the four.
Oh yeah.
Divisions.
So, Miley, yes, it's so part of my being.
Your name is Matt Erickson?
My name is Matt Erickson. I always forget that. I forget who I am. I also forget that the liberal arts is a totally loaded term. So yeah, I think we need to uncover what that means, who those students are. Like you said, there are a lot of students here who don't even realize that they're a part of that. I don't want to give away all of our stories, but one of those aspects of the liberal arts actually is the highest user of the Career Center after they graduate. So it's not the one you think it is. Anyway, more to come, but that feels like where we need to go next.
I think so. One of the things we always say here is that if school is the only skill you have, then student is the only job you're qualified to do. And I think, to your point, it's connected to major as well. If major is the only story you have, if the only thing you can tell people when you graduate is that you were a blank major, that is proof that the only skill you have is being a student.
Yep.
And so our focus on story is both that's the tool to get through this existential crisis and to figure out, what value you want to create in the future. And it's also the way to articulate that to other people, to show that you have done more than just be a student in school. Because you will have the transcript for that story.
I love it. This was episode 4. It was supposed to be the hopeful episode, right?
We ended on hope.
Yes.
It's a new
Such
hope.
hope.
That's a new hope. Thanks, Star Wars.
And cough drops.
And cough
Cough
drops.